The recent passing of Argentinian-born and Buenos Aires native Pope Francis has brought to the forefront a work published in 1595 by a Benedictine monk named Arnold Wyon, an alleged transliteration of a 12th century work written by Saint Malachi, the Archbishop of Armagh. This has become known as the Prophecy of the Popes, and if you haven't heard about it, well, you're going to, because of timing, perceived finality, and what I could call, in a phrase that I made up all by myself, intrigue born of penultimate claims. This is a special and brief episode based on the exigency of events, such as the passing of Pope Francis, on box number 7. So the Prophecy of the Popes is a Latin work containing 112 cryptic entries that purport to predict every Catholic pope, anti-pope, and tie up the entire succession of men with a harsh, apocalyptic conclusion. Its 1595 publication, which includes the original Latin stanzas along with Wyon's translation, has had mercurial periods of interest over time. It provides an uncanny level of descriptive accuracy of papal demographics right up until about 1590, and then, begins to start floundering without, inductive application and the need to make secondary assumptions. It begins with Celestine II, and it ends with Joseph Ratzinger, otherwise known as Pope Benedict. And if you take the prophecy at face value, Pope Francis is the last pope before the world falls into judgment. The prophecy is said to have emerged on the heels of a summon to St. Malachi by Pope Innocent II to have him obtain some clerical garments to be distributed elsewhere. And while in Rome, Malachi supposedly was beset by a vision of future popes, which were recorded in thus the 112 phrases. The manuscript allegedly lives in the Vatican archives, which, by the way, has been fodder for many an epic story, as I have mentioned before. It was apparently lost to circumstantial interest, at least until a 1590 papal conclave brought it back front and center. Considerable debate has actually taken place on the matter, whether you realize it or not, with several historians proclaiming the work just to be a forgery outright. Malachi's own biographer actually never mentions the work in his contemporaneous accounts of his subject. Another criticism of the work by Benito Montenegro makes an even more salient observation using what we call Occam's razor. You know, the assumption that the most direct explanation is most likely the real one. And he stated that the fact that all the prophecies are dead accurate up until 1590 and then fly off from there most likely indicates that it was actually written around 1590, applying all known information into an apparent prophetic context, sort of reverse engineering the prophecies and then proclaiming them to have been created 3 centuries or 4 centuries before. French priest and encyclopedist Louis Moreri claimed it was disseminated by supporters of Cardinal Girolamo Simoncelli in his desired ascent to the papacy during a 1590 conclave to replace Pope Urban VII. And admittedly, the book, which I just bought for Kindle, and let me say at the outset, I hate Kindle, but I really don't have the budget for every book that sits in my emergent mental hopper. The prophecies are meticulously accurate, at least as far as the historical accounts attest, and this begins to take on a Pink Floyd / Wizard of Oz set of limited but amazing corollaries. And if you don't know what I mean by that, it has been claimed that Pink Floyd, only I am going to work Pink Floyd into this. It has been claimed that Pink Floyd calibrated their music to the dark side of the moon and had it run commensurate with The Wizard of Oz. And if you start the album on the third roar of the MGM Lion, for a limited time, there are apparently astounding coincidences and seemingly otherworldly synchronicities. Then it begins to fall apart. So the same skeptics in either scenario have at least a valid claim to verifiable aphopenia, which is the tendency to find synchronistic meanings and patterns where none was actually intended. However, there is still something to be said for that quote-unquote feeling in the gut that is unsettling about all of this, including the death of Pope Francis and the upcoming conclave. Pope John Paul II in the book, he happens to be linked to the labor of the sun and the eclipse of the sun. And that prophecy is ultimately linked to the fact that 2 solar eclipses took place on both the birth and the death of John Paul, one each. One eclipse at the birth, one at his death. For the next one, the glory of the olive, unquote, adorns the alleged prophetic arrival of Pope Benedict in 2005 and the fact that his choice of papal name, Benedict, that contains a branch of the Olivetian order, a subsidiary branch of the Benedictine order. So why all the interest now? Well, the final stanzas say Peter the Roman, who will pasture his sheep in many tribulations, and when these things are finished, the city of 7 hills, which is Rome, will be destroyed, and the dreadful judge will judge his people. So the prophecy falls on 2 possibilities. One, the other popes, actually 3 possibilities. The other popes, to include Francis, would arrive unnamed between the Olivetian Pope and Peter the Roman. Or 2, the late Pope Francis is Peter the Roman, and the next guy that comes along is, well, potentially bad deal for everyone. Or there is, of course, 3, all of this is hogwash. But either way, a book like this will be studied feverishly for at least the next 20 days, as rules dictate the next papal conclave must get underway in that time with the usual secrecy and revelatory columns of white or black smoke emanating from the building. So who will be the next pope? And do any candidates stand out in your mind? I'm not a Catholic, but I have my theories. I'm just not going to speculate, but I am going to read the book in the next day or so to its completion. Oh, and one last thing. Lining the inside perimeter of St. Peter's Basilica are these equidistant circular portraits known as friezes, one of every single pope. Right next to the portrait of Pope Francis is the last open space in that row, which carries a huge eschatological significance, even if informally and not formally acknowledged by the Vatican. In the symbolic sense, if one is to believe the book, something different is afoot. And that was my original point about what I called intrigue born of penultimate claims. Any book that definitely prophesies the last of anything will certainly focus the mind, at least momentarily, until said prophecy is either fulfilled or broken on the anvil of falsehood. I guess we'll find out soon enough. All eyes toward Rome. This is box number 7.